Do you struggle sewing hexagon seams in machine embroidery? In this month's March sew along, I'll show you a simple trick to make them a breeze, so you can follow along and create this stunning spring hexagon runner with confidence. Keep watching. Welcome to the Spring Hexagon Runner Sew Along. I'm so excited to guide you through stitching the butterfly hexagon block. Load the butterfly hexagon block design onto your machine. If you haven't downloaded it yet, head to swpea.com to grab it now. Now, stitch the place and line for the batting. This line marks exactly where your first batting layer will go, so it's your guide for the next step. Place batting 1 on the hoop right side up, covering the stabilizer completely. Stitch it down to secure it, then remove the hoop from the machine and trim the batting about 1 to 2 mm from the stitching. This close trim reduces bulk, but be careful not to trim too near the stitches or it might loosen up later. Join the March Sew Along Facebook group today. I'll leave a link for that in the description below. There, you'll connect with a fun community and enter an exciting competition with great prizes. All you have to do is have some fun and complete this runner, take a photo and post. Next, place fabric A right side up over the batting, making sure it's centered and covers everything evenly. Stitch it down, then trim the center of fabric A using the inside of the hexagon as a guide. You'll likely cut out a smaller hexagon shape here to reveal the space where fabric B will sit. Place fabric B right side up over the trimmed area, aligning it with the hexagon's inner edge. Stitch it down and trim away any excess fabric. This sets the stage for the embroidery to come. Don't miss out. During the March Sew Along, you can grab this design for 30% off at swpea.com. For the embroidery, start with a satin stitch around fabric B to create a smooth, clean edge. Then add a decorative blanket stitch to give it some extra detail. Next, embroider the top butterfly wings, followed by the bottom wings. Once the wings are done, embroider the quilting and outline of the wings. This step adds texture and sharpens the butterfly shape, making it stand out. If you're enjoying this video tutorial, please give it a like and subscribe for more embroidery tips and inspiration. Now, embroider 4 smaller flowers onto the wings, then the 2 larger ones, followed by their centers. This builds up the design layer by layer. Next, stitch the butterfly's body and antenna. For any additional elements like flowers on the antenna, follow the diagram included with the design. Set this block aside until you've finished all the blocks needed for your row. Alright everyone, now that we've got our hexagon blocks ready from the first part of this tutorial, it's time to join them together to create the finished spring hexagon runner. You may have noticed those Y-shaped intersection seams in the design. They can seem a bit tricky at first, but they're actually pretty straightforward once you get started. There are plenty of ways to approach these, but we're using a method that's reliable and keeps things simple. Let's begin by trimming all your blocks to a 1/2 inch seam. This is a crucial step because it ensures everything aligns properly when we sew. Accuracy here really impacts the final look of your runner, so take your time to get those edges even. Next, lay your blocks in rows to match your chosen layout pattern. Depending on what you're going for, straight rows lengthways, crossways, or even a diagonal arrangement. Set them up accordingly. The pattern includes some example layouts to inspire you, so feel free to refer to those for ideas. To join a row, take your first 2 blocks and place them right sides together, aligning the edges you'll sew. Pin through the corner points, pushing the pin straight through both blocks to line them up exactly. Then cross pin the seam you're about to stitch by adding pins perpendicular to the seam line. This keeps the fabric steady as you sew. Now at your machine, lower the needle precisely into the first corner point where the blocks meet. So forward a few stitches, about 3 or 4 should do, then back tack the same amount to secure the seam. This reinforcement matters, since these corners take some stress during assembly. Now stitch 1 to 2 mm between the border stitch lines already on your blocks, and sewing just inside them keeps your new seam hidden on the front for a polished finish. Here's an important tip. Don't stitch past the corner point into the seam allowance. This is called the stitching to the net technique. It means stopping at the edge of the visible fabric so the intersection turns out flat and neat. Slow down as you approach the end and stop right at the next corner pin to keep it precise. Continue this process until your row is complete. Once it's stitched, open the seams and press them flat with an iron. Pressing them open reduces bulk and helps the row sit smoothly. Repeat this for each row until all your horizontal strips are finished. Now let's connect those rows to bring out the Y intersections. Lay one row on top of another, right sides together, and locate the first intersection where the hexagon points meet. Use the perimeter stitching on the blocks as a guide to pin that first corner accurately. This keeps everything aligned as the Y shape takes form. Pin the start and end corners of the seam fold the seam allowances closed, directing them away from the intersection to avoid catching them in the stitching, which could add bulk. Sew between the border lines again, stopping at the corner points just as before. Don't press the seam open yet. It's easier to handle the intersections if you wait. Move to the next seam in the row, pin the end points and stitch it the same way. starting and stopping at the corners, ensuring the back seam allowances stay closed and out of the way each time. As you work through the joins, you'll see that with just a couple left, the rows start to align almost effortlessly. It's a great moment when the pattern clicks into place. Pin only the section you're sewing rather than the whole row to keep it manageable. And check that the seam allowances aren't creeping into your stitches at the start or end. Extra fabric there can complicate pressing later. Once all the rows are joined, examine each intersection on the front. If you spot any tiny pleats, adjust them gently before pressing. Press the remaining seams open, working one intersection at a time. Start by pressing the seam toward the intersection, then carefully press the corner points so they fan out into a pinwheel effect. This pinwheel shape makes the intersection lie flat and adds a neat, finished look, like a little star where the blocks connect. Some people might trim these corner pieces to reduce bulk, but I suggest leaving them intact. It keeps the intersection sturdy over time. Finally, trim the edges of your assembled runner to a clean 1/2 inch all the way around. This neatens the perimeter and prepares it for the backing step. Now, let's move on to the backing for your runner. Start by measuring the length and width of your completed table runner. Add about 1/2 inch extra to each side. This ensures the backing covers the front fully with room for the seam allowance. Cut your backing fabric. Let's call it fabric C to match those dimensions. Then cut that piece in half lengthwise. This split makes sewing and turning easier. A handy trick for projects like this: Take the two halves and place them right sides together on your table and pin along one edge. Stitch a 1/2 inch seam down that edge, leaving a 6-inch gap in the middle. Mark it with pins if needed to avoid sewing it closed. That gap is where you'll turn the runner right side out, so keep it wide enough to work with. Once stitched, press the seams open to keep it flat and minimize bulk. Lay your assembled runner on top of fabric C right sides together, aligning the edges as closely as possible. Pin them lightly to hold everything in place. If you'd like an exact fit, trim the backing to match the front shape now, though it's fine to leave it slightly larger too. Stitch a 1/2 inch seam all the way around, placing it just inside the border stitching from the blocks. This keeps the seam tucked behind the decorative lines on the front for a sleek finish. Trim the edges of the entire piece down to a 1/4 inch to cut away any excess fabric. Then clip the corners. snip diagonally close to the stitching without cutting through it. And make small cuts into any tight angles. This helps the corners turn out crisp and flat without bunching. Carefully turn the runner right side out through the 6-inch gap in the backing seam to sharpen the edges. Run the point of a chopstick or a tool like that pink thing along the inside seams. It pushes everything into place so the runner lies smoothly. Press the whole piece firmly with an iron to set the shape and smooth out wrinkles, giving extra attention to the edges for a clean look. Close the 6-inch gap in the backing by hand stitching it with a needle and thread for a seamless finish, or use fabric glue for a faster option. And there you have it. Your spring hexagon runner is all finished. It's the perfect piece to brighten up your table or any space you choose. If you love how yours turned out, snap a quick photo and share it in the March Sew Along Facebook group. I'd love to see your beautiful creations. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.